So the viral moment du jour is Sydney Sweeney. So,
Yeah, so Sydney Sweeney and American Eagle,
yep,
they just came out with a new ad that has kind of gone controversial. It's basically a campaign with the wordplay on the great genes, Geans versus Genes, which has kind of triggered some accusations of promoting eugenics and white supremacy, because she's talking about, the heritage of like how, genes, are make their way down from your parents down to the children, so that people were questioning whether she's talking about being, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white woman with great genes, and like what that means, for not having great genes, right? So, and then there was the counter backlash on top of it, right? Where critics were saying that this has gone, too woke, it's oversensitive. I didn't think that the whole point of it was to talk about eugenics or white supremacy. I really think that they were just like, playing on blue jeans, the wordplay there. And then also, I think it's like, it's basically copying the, famous or infamous, as the case may be, ad from Calvin Klein and Brooke Shields, which also kind of ended up stirring up its own drama because she was 14 when she, filmed that
yeah, she was
commercial.
a literal child, but being, very much sexualized by the
Yeah,
company, and yeah.
yeah. So, in this commercial, Sydney Sweeney was also kind of being sexualized, right? There's a lot of, camera angles on like her chest and like her boobs, which she's known for, which is also like, one of those things that like, makes me think that it was more about that and not about the whole like white supremacy thing. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Amanda? Whether it was
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that it was more about American Eagle thinking, "Hey, how do we get today's hot new it girl wearing our jeans?" And Sydney Sweeney is one of today's hot new it girls. I mean, I think it would be different if they chose an unknown, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman to be a spokesperson. I think that would be different, certainly. But in this case, but she has been like an it girl, right? She's been making famous movies and like she's been hosting SNL. Like
Yeah, yeah.
she's famous, right?
Right.
I can see the brand story in this in a legitimate way, which is, I mean, I in high school I wore American Eagle clothes. Like that was like a store that I went to. I would go there, try to get something on sale. That was something that comes from like my high school. Like I get high school vibes from that. It's been and after high school and college, I felt like I stopped wearing American Eagle. I felt like I didn't see them as I didn't see the stores as often, so just kind of thought that it declined, but it feels like it's back again. So the thing that I wonder is they have kind of a story to tell around like how can we be more evergreen?
Hmm.
Like how can we make sure that our brand stands the test of time and that we're not just a fad?
Hmm.
And one way is through an evergreen product like jeans.
Hmm.
Like how can we market our one of our best-selling items and show that it's reliable and people should buy it?
Hmm.
I think jeans is totally reasonable. Jeans the pants,
Yeah.
um, and it's called American Eagle.
Mhm.
So it's like I can see that if you're really trying to look for it, like, yeah, I think you can find a way to be offended by everything if you try hard enough, or
Mhm.
you can try to find the eugenics message if you want to. But I just don't really think it was that deep. And
No.
the other thing is, I think even if it were, that would indicate some kind of master plan for which this is just the first step of a complex process in which American Eagle will take over the world. I
Yeah.
don't, like you would
Yeah.
have to be like, well, okay, well, what would be the end game?
Mhm.
Which is why like I just don't think it's that deep. I think they were just like, oh, let's get that hot girl with the big boobs to talk about our jeans.
Yeah, and I think they were also trying to elevate it the way that they felt the Calvin Klein's jeans, right? Like that was elevated at the time, and it's like this fashion brand that like people still talk about. So I think that that's kind of like the goal that they were aiming for. Another thing too is like if you were trying to go the white supremacist like angle, a lot of what the culture play is happening there is a kind of like a reversion to like old, conservative values, traditional, American like heritage, blah, 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 all that, which tends to play more toward like the trad wife, like conservative, like clothing and all. And the ad was definitely not conservative, right? Like she's basically showing her boobs and like highlighting her, boobs. And it's just like that message, I think, for me didn't hit the whole like they're trying to go back to like traditional values and like all that, which is kind of where I see white supremacy kind of headed in terms of like the cultural wars. So I really don't think that was the overall intent of that, but I agree, like Amanda said, that you can try to find that if you're looking for it. Let's talk a little bit about like how it did before all of the controversy. So the original post on Instagram got over 1.1 million views. And the stock soared after the announcement, which is not surprising because, like Amanda said, Sydney Sweeney is a current it girl and like people are paying attention to her. It also brings back what happened with the Dr. Squatch soap that she also was a sponsor. Well, it's not a sponsor. What is that?
She was I
An
guess kind of a
endorsement?
brand ambassador, right?
Yeah,
Because like
like a brand ambassador.
she, yeah, it was funny because I actually had to look into it because I was like, did she start her own soap line? But no,
Yeah.
it was Dr. Squatch made a limited edition soap
Mhm.
that used Sydney Sweeney's bathwater. So that
Right, right.
was Dr. Squatch's stunt, and Unilever acquired or made an offer to is going to buy Dr. Squatch for $1.5 billion.
Mhm.
Maybe it's the Sydney Sweeney effect here.
Right, right. So that's what people are, kind of bringing up. It's like, oh, she's, obviously, choosing particular brands to endorse. In order to have that be part of her portfolio, right? And she's going about it a little differently than a lot of other it girls, right? Like if we bring up Zendaya, who kind of does more of like the luxury retailers and like brands, she seems to be going for more of like the accessible brands that like you can, you as a regular person can get, right? Because American Eagle is pretty it's not cheap, but it's a little bit more accessible than a lot of the bigger brands. So that seems to be more of like with the type of brand that she's creating for herself, of being a little bit more accessible for both like women, but then also creating, soap. I assume it was mostly men that bought the soap and not women.
Yeah, yeah,
you
because it's
know,
yeah,
so
because Dr. Squatch they mostly make I mean, anybody can buy their products, right? But I
sure.
think it's generally grooming products aimed towards men.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But it seems to be the whole like, girls want to be her, men want to be with her type of
Yeah.
brand that she's creating for herself. And she does that by getting sponsoring brands that are a little bit more accessible to her. So that's why this made sense to me. And if you'll remember, it's two different ad spots, right? So there's the one that's like, going down as she's wearing like the jean jacket that is also part of. So it's two products she has worked with American Eagle to create. There's the jean jacket and then the pants. And it has like a butterfly on it because it's supposed to be in support of domestic violence victims. Um, but the two ads, right? One is with like the jean jacket and it's like going down like her front and it's showing like her boobs and then she's like, eyes up here. And then the other one, which is the one that like, has caused more of the controversy, is where she's like lying down and she starts talking about, the, parents passing down the genes to their children. So the fact that it's both of those ads together, I think also, um, goes with the argument that it wasn't the intention for it to be about white supremacy and eugenics. But here
Mhm.
we are. I think it's the
Here
fact
we
that
are.
we're in this cultural, and political, you know, war, it's not a war, but it's kind of the times that we're in, which kind of makes it overall a little bit more annoying that we're even having to have this conversation. Another point to like my argument that I don't think that that was the intent is the fact that American Eagle hasn't really come out to address the controversy one way or another. They're kind of keeping quiet, which, honestly, that's probably the best way that they can go about it, because since it wasn't their intent to come out and apologize for it, I think would end up making it worse for them. um and if it was their intent, that's not really something you want to admit to. Right. Them keeping quiet kind of makes sense as they kind of just go through it. One way that they did seem or people are kind of pointing at is that they just came out with another ad that has a different model, and people are kind of calling it damage control, which, one way or the other, they're not just going to use Sydney Sweeney to promote everything, right? She's only got those two items. They were always going to revert back to other models and like the rest of the clothes that they're promoting. So I think that kind of makes sense. But I think that's one of the things now that brands kind of have to be keeping an eye out for, whether it is intentional or not. You don't want to get caught between progressive criticism and like or conservative criticism, and either way to make it seem as if you're playing one way or the other, because that's just most brands don't want to wade into that territory, and they shouldn't, right? Like everything shouldn't be some type of like culture war. And the fact that it did get to this point, I think says more about the rest of us and society and where we're at and everything than like the actual product itself.
Yeah. By the way, I want to add to the regarding the jeans ad is the pants themselves.
Hmm.
When she's saying, talking about like jeans getting passed down through your parents, I think where there's another sort of wordplay there, it's the fact that so many elder millennials and maybe even Gen Xers wore these jeans when we were teenagers, and we are all old enough where we could be literally passing down our American Eagle jeans to our preteen or teenage kids. So like that's actually very fathomable.
Hmm.
And I'm talking about literal jean pants.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, one of the things that oftentimes I hear like millennials talk about is the fact that the clothes that they used to wear back when they were growing up lasted so much longer and was a better quality. So to think about like having kept those jeans,
Mhm.
right, that you originally bought from American Eagle or Abercrombie or Hollister, all those companies, and to still have them now, and that they're all kind of coming back, like the styles that we used to wear back then are now essentially coming back again.
Yeah. I kind
um
of think that's more
Right.
so what they're referencing. That's what
Right,
I
right, right.
think.
Yeah, but maybe that's a thing that they now have to make a little bit more obvious,
Yeah.
It does kind of like talk to one of the things that I've been hearing, which is kind of interesting in terms of just like culturally where we're at, is how many more things have to be spelled out a little bit
Mm.
more clearly, because and I don't want to blame Gen Z because they don't know how to read or whatever, but like they're just used to seeing things or being told things a little bit more than like we used to be back then.
Well,
One
yeah,
of
because
those ways.
basically every video on TikTok is breaking down something else. It's
Mhm.
I mean, all the content you see nowadays, like, here's my reaction to this thing.
Right.
Here's what this thing means. And it's
Mhm.
very explicit of this is what to think about this scene in this movie,
Mhm.
And sometimes it's interesting or it's helpful when you're trying to decode more ambiguous or even, it's purposefully ambiguous
Mhm.
content, like the end of what's that movie? Like the end of Inception, right? Like
Inception, yeah.
like there are all kinds of reaction videos and
Mhm.
interpretations of that. But, you know, anyway, that's kind of a digression, but I just wanted to make
No,
the
but
point
I
that
think it's
like
like part of the it's
yeah,
not the problem, but part
yeah, but
of
it's part
what's
of it.
happening, right? Where it's like even now where it's like we joke about how with like Netflix movies, they're like putting everything in there and in
Mhm.
the subtitles and saying having the characters say exactly what's happening
Yeah.
because people can't infer things anymore. So
Yeah. Oh,
maybe
no,
I think that's part of the thing.
we should call out, by the way, that I was trying to figure out where the controversy originated, and I think it originated on TikTok and X,
Mhm.
platforms where people are often explaining things to other
Mhm.
people. and it does make me wonder if whatever
And being
original TikTok
controversial for
video.
likes.
Yeah, or yeah. It makes me wonder where if, whatever original TikTok video it was where the person said it was about white supremacy and eugenics, makes me wonder how many people really legitimately thought that before that person brought it up, and but, like, I
I
do
mean, I
wonder,
think it
and
shows because
yeah,
initially the stock price went up. It went viral by itself as just like the video because I mean,
yeah.
she was showing her
It's
boobs, I
Sydney
think,
Sweeney,
and
yeah.
it's Sydney Sweeney. But it wasn't until after that it all kind of grew. And I think you were mentioning earlier that you think, bots were kind of involved in like
I
it, right?
wonder, and, like, I don't know there's any way to know, especially because bots are so sophisticated now, and a lot of social networks themselves are having a hard time, weeding them out, but I wonder, right, because on TikTok, like, do we know how many, users are actual users versus bots?
Hmm.
On Twitter/X,
Same.
this was at 3 years ago at SparkToro when we ran our analysis of how many accounts were bots, basically bots or inactive accounts or spam. And we at the time found that it was probably close to 20%. And then
It's
now,
wild.
and over the past year or so, there are other sources that peg that number as closer to 60%. And so imagine if close to 60% of X users are bots. Then it comes to like, okay, so how many people really did think
Hmm.
this about the ad? And I don't know, right?
Right. Right, right, right. Yeah, and I think a thing to always remember is that a lot of people, in order to get those like Twitter payouts, right? You say controversial things and you have people like kind of jump on and then that gets them money. So, you're being incentivized to be controversial.
Mhm.
And how do you do that? Is by, bringing up white supremacy and like eugenics, and, talking about that. And understand that like there are some, other things happening politically and culturally that, are bringing up the topics overall, but to try to pin everything to that kind of makes it so that like less people pay attention to the noise for like when it's really happening, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I worry about that.
Mhm.
What I am also seeing is a lot of people saying something similar of like, this is all just a distraction.
Mhm.
Like who cares about this? I am the bigger prize here, friends.
Yeah,
We got to
exactly.
unseal those Epstein files, like,
Yeah, right.
and they should. All right, let's get to our next topic.